If rocks could talk, I wonder what they would say. Perhaps they would just sit there and sleep. Maybe they would explain some profound truth about life and the meaning of our existence. Or maybe they would just tell funny jokes, I don't know. If rocks could talk, what would they say? I understand that's a very strange thing to start a video with, but we actually do find an answer to this in the Bible. We find out that if rocks could speak, that they would praise Jesus. You see, we read in Luke chapter 19, verse 28 to 40, we read of Jesus entering Jerusalem on the donkey. This is known as Palm Sunday, which just passed last Sunday. It's also known as his triumphant entry into Jerusalem. You see, once his disciples brought him a donkey, Jesus got on it and he rode it into Jerusalem. Then something strange happened as he rode this donkey. Crowds began to gather around him. And soon they began to take off their cloaks and throw it on the ground. They got palm branches from the trees and threw them on the ground as well for Jesus and the donkey to walk over. But they didn't stop there, because soon after that, the people began to sing. They began to sing to Jesus, and listen to the words that the people sang. They sang, "Blessed be the King who comes in the name of the Lord." That's found in Luke chapter 19, verse 38. They are calling Jesus a king. They recognize him as the king. What's really going on here? Well, they realize something about Jesus, something special. They realize that Jesus isn't just a normal man, but that Jesus is God's Son, that he has come to this world sent by God in the name of the Lord. And so they worship Jesus. And yet there's some people who weren't too happy. These people, the religious leaders of the day, known as the Pharisees, they weren't happy that Jesus was accepting worship. They thought this was outrageous. Only God deserves worship. They didn't realize that Jesus actually is God, and that's why he can accept worship. But they turn to Jesus and they say this, that they tell him to stop the whole thing, stop accepting worship, tell them off. But Jesus responds with these words in verse 40, "I tell you, if you were silent, the very stones would cry out." Jesus says that if we were to stop all of this, if the crowds were to stop singing and take a break, that the very rocks, the stones, then they would cry out in praise to him. What's the point that Jesus is making here? He's not saying that the stones are literally going to singing, but it's rather that he is so worthy of praise, he's so worthy of worship, that even the rocks know it. Because Jesus is the creator of everything, because he created the rocks know who he is, and they would worship him if they could speak. The rocks would cry out. Jesus is so worthy of worship as God's Son. But, of course, we don't know, and we won't find out how the rocks would speak and what they would say, because the people didn't stay silent. They kept on worshipping Jesus. They kept on worshipping him as he rode through those streets. But the purpose of Jesus coming to earth, of course, it wasn't just to ride on a donkey to accept praise and worship in this way, but he was sent by God in the name of the Lord for a special purpose. And of course that purpose was to go to the cross, which we will find out about tomorrow. But for now, let's consider this. Who do you worship today, or what do you worship today? Because we all worship something, be it money, our family, our work, a football team, whatever it might be. We all worship, we all desire, we all love something. And yet if it isn't Jesus, then it's not going to give you true joy and happiness. Maybe you realize that already. You're chasing after something, hoping it will satisfy and bring you wholeness, and it's not doing it for you. Because only Jesus can satisfy, because only Jesus deserves our worship. And at the cross, we notice this. At the cross, we worship Jesus. Who will you worship today?